You've probably heard React is a library, not a framework. Unlike a fully fledged framework such as Angular, React does not have built-in solutions for data fetching, state management, tooling, or routing. These are all features that need to be provided by some third-party library. The React library itself is responsible for rendering data as UI elements and updating the UI when data changes, but not much else. In particular, we need an option for routing. Superficially, this means the ability to map URLs to specific components in our app, but it includes managing browser history, handling navigation, and parsing any URL parameters we may have. When it comes to picking a router, React Router is one of the more popular options, along with Tanstack Router, Wouter, and the Next.js router. So, if React Router provides routing for React applications, how do we actually use it? Well, if we want purely a client-side app, all we need to do is add a router that wraps our components, add new components that correspond to each route, utilize hooks for navigation and URL parsing, and we're done. However, React Router 7 is more than just this. V7 offers not only a solution for the client-side routing, but powerful SSR and data fetching capabilities. To discuss these, we need to break down the three modes in React Router 7: declarative, data, and framework. These modes are additive, meaning declarative mode has fewer features than data mode, and data mode has fewer features than the framework mode. The declarative mode of V7 contains the basic client-side routing features that were present in the earlier versions of the router. This includes matching URLs to components and navigating through the app. React Router 7 provides a handful of useful hooks and components for accomplishing this, including the link component, the useNavigate hook for programmatically navigating users, and the useLocation hook for finding the current location. The data mode of V7 adds features for data fetching and sending requests. It uses loader and action functions to essentially hoist data to the top level of the router. If you're familiar with Tanstack Query, also known as React Query, it's trying to solve the same problems. How do we get data? How do we submit forms? How do we re-trigger data refreshing? These are all problems not solved by using a vanilla instance of Axios or the Fetch API, which React Router 7 addresses. We can add a loader function for a particular route which can fetch data from an API before anything on that route is rendered. Similarly, we can provide an action for a route, which is responsible for doing data mutation. Here, an action is given to the project's route. When the form in this route is submitted, it will call the action, which submits it to the backend and navigates to a new page. All loader data is refetched as well to make sure the data is up to date after the form submission. If we don't want to use a form, we can also call actions with a fetcher, which will not cause a navigation. The response data for the action can be accessed with the useActionData hook. Lastly, we have the framework mode. This takes the data mode, wraps it in a Vite plugin, and turns it into an SSR framework that fulfills the same niche as Next.js. It provides a type-safe href, type-safe route module API, intelligent code splitting, and SPA, SSR, and static rendering strategies. If we use server-side rendering, we can call the actions and loaders on the server. In this code, the product will be fetched on the server before the web page is sent to the client. We don't have to use spinners to stand in for the loading data, like we would in a client-rendered SPA. Data can still be fetched on the client side, however, using the client loader. React Router 7 has a similar paradigm for actions. A client action function is run on the browser and can be used to fetch data like we saw in the data mode. A server-side action is run on the server and is removed from the client-side bundle. They can be used to access data from our database, which potentially eliminates the need for a separate backend. And I know what some of you are thinking. Wait a second, isn't this basically Remix? Whatever happened to that framework? Yeah, so about that. For those not familiar, Remix.js was a server-side rendered TypeScript framework developed a few years ago that is being merged into React Router 7. So the two are basically the same framework at this point. In fact, on the documentation for Remix, it tells you to just use React Router 7 for any new projects. The next version of Remix will be pivoted in a different direction, becoming an almost entirely new framework that doesn't even use React. Sounds confusing? Yeah, but all you need to know is React Router 7 is essentially the same thing as Remix at this point. Well, there's a lot of information here, so how do we know which mode of React Router 7 to use? I'll keep it simple. If you want just a client-side app with simple routing, use the declarative mode. If you like the loader and action concepts of Remix and an SPA and don't want to use React Query, use the data mode. If you want a complete SSR React framework but don't want to use Next.js, then use the framework mode. Overall though, the React Router 7 framework mode has become my front-end choice for its simplicity and SSR capabilities. I would recommend checking out this great video by the React Router 7 developers and the documentation if you have any further questions.